Streamer. Powered by Streamer. Stream your podcast, stream your story, stream yourself. Try it free at streamr.nyc.
Welcome to the Daily Bag Podcast, and my name is Thomie Isreal. My mother didn't give me that name. I gave myself that name with the hope that I could live by it, stand by it, and when it's all said and done, I lived up to it. So let's get right down to it. I found me a little space in the college to do my podcast today, man. I'm blessed. I'm feeling good. Look, I ain't got to worry about the background noise. I ain't got to worry about somebody walking in on me. I'm losing focus and all that. So before somebody do walk in on this space, let me get right down to it. I want to talk about today about books that changed my life, man. Because what I do know is that all great leaders are avid readers. So we could go from the Steve Jobs to the Martin Luther Kings to the Bill Gates to the Ed Myers. I mean, we can. The list goes on and on. They all been great readers. You know what I'm saying? So me myself, I consider myself a reader. I always love to read. I might not read the things you read, but I love to read. Maybe it was just the sports section of the newspaper, but I was consistent on that, or books about sports. I never read thick books. At 12, 13 years old, that just wasn't my thing. So someone gave me a book called Man, Child in the Promised Land. Now, I don't remember who gave me this book, but I remember having this book, and it was 500-something pages. And I don't know, I usually was intimidated by those type of books, but I wound up getting, it wasn't for no school project or nothing, but I wound up getting on the train with this book on my way to school. When my stop came to get off to go to school, I was so engaged in that book, into those pages, that I just kept going. And I never got off the train till 3 o'clock, so I was all deep into that book. It felt like that man was talking to me. He was a man from Harlem. So I knew the books, the places he was talking about. And I remember it opened up with him being shot with a pump shotgun for stealing someone's sheets. Because times were so tough, he was stealing sheets. I guess he was selling them for a nickel or a quarter. And we talking about, this book is based back in the 40s and 50s. It was published in, I think, the 60s. But it was like he was talking to me. For some reason, I remember, can't wait to get off the train and run and see my man, Hema Bleem. He was my second best friend. I ran to Hema Bleem and said, Hema Bleem, you gotta read this book. He's talking to us. And I was amazed by that. And it really did something in my life, because he had went through all of this hardship of getting shot as a young boy, going to prison as a young man, and doing prison time, and wind up coming home and changing his life and becoming someone positive. That was some kind of influence to me at that time. Like, because I didn't really get to see those type of people. I didn't get to meet congressmen. I didn't get to meet people who was like stockbrokers and all these people in my hood. I seen different images that I thought was positive and that I wanted to follow. So by me reading about, his name was Claude Brown too. By me reading Man, Child in the Promised Land by Claude Brown, it gave me that little arm. You know what I'm saying? I still probably wound up on another path, but that gave me the that, wow, I could be somebody. Second book I remember reading that changed my life is Make Me Wanna Holler. And I remember my aunt giving me this book, and I was a little older, and it was my aunt, Cynthia, one of my favorite aunts. She gave me this book. It was Make Me Wanna Holler. I remember seeing it on 125th Street. Now, 125th Street in Harlem used to be, in the 80s, in the early 90s, used to have all these stands of all these entrepreneurs outside selling all kinds of things. And I used to walk past, see people that used to sell books, and I used to walk past that book. I used to see it all the time. Like, man, I ain't reading that book. He had a kufi on it. He talking that like Malcolm X and Islam, Muslim stuff. So I just was passing it up on it. Then I remember my aunt giving it to me one day. And I said, man, I'm gonna give this a shot. I think his name was Nathaniel McCall. And I remember reading that book, and it was like Man, Child in the Promised Land 2.0. Because now I'm older. I'm about 16 years old, 17 years old, but I got in trouble. And they wound up sending me away for a year. Right, because of what to pay my debt to society. And I remember coming home and I was swaying. I never wanted to do bad again. And I was swaying which way to go. And my aunt might have seen that. And she gave me that book, and I read that book, Make Me Wanna Holler. And it showed that he was from the same areas I was from, right? And he wound up doing a long prison term. And he wound up coming out and becoming a journalist. Like, he never ever thought about being a journalist, but he wound up getting into journalism while he was doing his debt to society, and he wound up coming home and being a journalist, man. A journalist. I'm like, I never fathomed. I might have seen an Afro-American on the news, being a newscaster once in a blue. I think John Johnson might have been the first one I seen, and we all looked up to John Johnson because he was the only face of color on the news. So we looked up John Johnson, but it still was like so far-fetched for us. You see what I'm saying? So by me reading about Make Me Wanna Holler, Mr. McCall, I was like, wow, he been through all that, and he become a great journalist for one of the greatest newspapers in the world. He was a journalist for the Washington Post. I was like, wow, it gave me that inspiration, that I could do something, that I could be somebody, that I can go through things and get in trouble, yet it's not too late. I don't have to be a career criminal. I did that, but I can be better. And that's what I got from reading that book. That's number 2. Number 3 is, I have to give it to 48 Laws of Power, man. I have to give it to that, man, because that book really, what it did, has all the great strategy. And then at this time in my life, and we'll talk about that in a later time, where I was at when I read 48 Laws of Power. But at that time, I was really had to deal with real strategies, right? Because of the circumstance and situation I was in. But what it did to me, other than reading it, and I tell you one thing I used to always do, for the last 48 days of the year, I used to read 1 law a day. But what it did to me, it made me know that most of those laws in there, like maybe 40 out of the 48, I did already. Subconsciously, I was already doing that. So that kind of made me, it stamped me that I can be a great leader, that I'm already on my way to the leadership because I'm doing all the things that they saying makes a great leader, that I'm already doing those things. So that kind of gave me like a good stamp, like to keep going, to keep doing the things I was doing, man. That's 48. So right now we got Man Child in the Promised Land, Make Me Wanna Holler, and 48 Laws of Power. Number 4, I have to go with Machiavelli the Prince. Now, we're not talking about Tupac. We're talking about Machiavelli the Prince. He was a great conqueror of Italy. He was a Italian, and he was a great general. And his book was a disclosure, because in his book and it's a short 105-page book, right? The disclosure is very thin. However, it was more powerful to me than Sun Tzu, The Art of War. And The Art of War, you know how thick that is, right? You know how thick that is. But the disclosure to me, Machiavelli, he was able to give me so much in those 105 pages. I was like, wow. Mostly he talked about conquering, right? And how you can conquer all these things for his country. He did all of these He even conquered all these countries. Then he made one mistake. He tried to go after the big dog. Forgot who it was. I don't know if it was Rome or who he went after. And they lost. They lost that war. And his country forgot all the good things they done. All the good other things he done for the country, and threw him in the dungeon. And gave him life in the dungeon. And he wrote the disclosure. Wow, he was in the dungeon. And I was like, wow, he really, when you in those type of circumstances, you really pouring out your heart. So he really wrote some good things. And the one thing that stood out to me that I carried for the rest of my entire life, what I carried with me, and he said, men who inherit empires will lose them and they will never gain them back again. But men who build empires can lose empires and have the ability to do it over and over and over again. And that installed in me, because that's like me. I lose empires. I be making foolish decisions. I build them, but I'll make some poor decisions and lose the empire. But I'm always blessed and fortunate enough to build another one, man. You know what I'm saying? I'm talking about from losing my newspaper empire when I was selling newspaper, became one of the number 1 newspaper sellers in New York. I think I was number 3 in New York. The whole New York, people that sold newspaper, I was number 3. I lost that empire for foolish thinking. Then I wound up building another company, and then I wound up building another company, Urban Horses. Then I wound up building another company called Urban Recycling, and I am not finished. I might be down right now, and I'm living in the redemption house, but I am not finished building empires. And I get that from the Prince, Machiavelli the Prince, from that book, The Disclosure. It installed that in me, that if I build them and something goes wrong, I'll be able to rebuild. And I noticed that with all my friends that used to get like accident money, think about it. They're friends that inherited things and they wind up losing it. Maybe like they got $200,000 from an accident. When they blow all that money, they pop forever. You ever notice that? They never get to come back, right? They never. People who had their parents used to give them everything and they got older and their parents no longer gave it to them. They wasn't able to continue on and start doing things great again. That's just in my life. And maybe in your life, your friends able to do that. But I'm talking about in my life. I never saw it. My life and a couple other things that I viewed, I never see people get to come back from that. When they don't build the empire, when they just give in the empire. And I think that's 4. I have to give number 5 to a fiction. I have to give number 5 to one of my favorite authors, Cindy Sheldon, If Tomorrow Comes. And I'll tell you why I go with a fiction on this one. And it's a tie. Now, don't get me wrong. Donald Goins, too. But Donald Goins has 16 joints. I agree. I'm going to give it to Cindy. I'm going to give it to Cindy Sheldon because Cindy Sheldon made me imagine. Made me say, hey, I can write. I said, maybe I can do this. He made me have the imagination, made my imagination run and made me want to write. And I think that's why I was able to write some great screenplays in my life and plays. Because let's not get it twisted. I keep it honest with you all the way. Because remember, this is a conversation with myself. And I give you the permission to eavesdrop and the warrant to listen in as I have the conversation with myself. Now, you got to think. I'm going to be honest with you. I know I can write. Because I used to be in this maximum security prison, and I used to be able to write plays, and my plays got so good, the whole prison, the whole penitentiary was shut down. Talking about COs, the warden, and everybody used to come to my plays, man. And I'm gonna talk about that on another day, man. I'm gonna talk about that. So Cindy Sheldon gave me that imagination, and that's why I have to give it to Cindy Sheldon. But I have to give the honorable mention to Mr. Donald Goins, man, because Mr. Donald Goins inspired me to write too. So I let Donald Goins come off the bench, man. That the bench player is very important too. Let's not get that twisted. So Donald Goins, I read every 16 of Donald Goins' book, plus Donald Writes No More. You know what I'm saying? That's when he got killed, and I think someone else stepped in to finish up and write about him and finish up the last book that he was writing. So that's my 5, plus Donald Goins coming off the bench. Those are the 5 books that kind of changed my life. But I have plenty other books that inspire me, but those stick out the most. Those came in times of my life when I was in certain situations, and those came and gave me those impact that carried me for 30 years. You know what I'm saying? 20 years later, these books stand out in my mind. You know, when a book stands out in your mind, 30 years later, you remember the name and the title and how many pages. What's the name? When I read Man Child of Promise, it was 446 pages. And I know the name, and I know the author, and I know how the opening page starts. I mean, those books stand out. Now, the other books had impacts in my life. You're saying books like Setback is Only a Setup for a Comeback. Those books all had, things in my life. But those 6 books, those 6 authors really stamped something. And we'll talk about other books later on. But those are the ones that really, Man Child of the Promised Land, Make Me Wanna Holler, 48 Laws of Power, Machiavelli the Prince, The Disclosure, and Cindy Sheldon, If Tomorrow Comes, and Donald Goins. Those are my favorite books, man. I hope you enjoyed that, man. I just wanted to get that out of my system. I know I was kind of rushing because I'm a little late for work. I already ran over about 8 minutes. So I'm going to get on out of here. I'm going to wrap this up. My name is Thomie Isreal. Thank you for listening. And, hope maybe you go read one of those books, or you can tell me about the 5 books that did something in your life, man. I mean, come on. Let's not make this a monologue. Let's give something back. And with that, I'm gone.